When strawberries may still be green and blueberries and fruit trees are just beginning to set their crops, hidden among the leaves of an unassuming shrub, clusters of deep blue berries are already ripening. Join me as we travel from the forests of Siberia and the mountains of Japan to the backyard gardens of Minnesota and beyond. This is the story of honeyberries.
Plants have a funny way of communicating. Too much water, they droop. Too little water, they droop. Today, we're helping you to decode the mystery of watering so your garden can thrive all summer long.
Hello and welcome to the Petal and Plot Pod, a seasonal plant stories and garden tips podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Anissa.
And I'm Eric.
Honeyberries, or hascap berries, belong to an unusual family. They're honeysuckles. Most people know honeysuckles as fragrant, flowering shrubs or vines, but honeyberries are one of the few members of the family grown primarily for their fruit. They are native across an enormous range that includes northern Japan, Siberia, Russia, China, Mongolia, Scandinavia, and parts of Eastern Europe. For thousands of years, wild honeyberries grew in forests where winters were long and severe. Unlike peaches, apples, or cherries, honeyberries evolved to thrive in cold climates. Some varieties can survive temperatures of below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. In the wild, they learned to endure conditions that would challenge even the hardiest fruit crops. One of the most common names for honeyberries today is hascap. The word comes from the indigenous Ainu people of northern Japan. The term is often translated as berry of long life or many gifts on the branch. Whether taken literally or poetically, the name reflects the fruit's importance. For generations, the berries were gathered from wild plants and valued as a source of nutrition in northern climates where fresh fruit could be scarce. Their early ripening made them especially valuable after long winters. And for much of history, honeyberries were wild harvested. People throughout northern Asia and Europe gathered them from natural populations, collecting the berries for food and medicine. And the berries became a part of seasonal traditions that connected people to the landscape. Because they ripened very early, often before strawberries, they signaled the arrival of summer. Eric, let's do a berry check-in. What berries do you grow? And what berries do you wish you had in your yard?
The only berry I have now is strawberry. I used to have raspberries, and then I gave them away to a friend because they got out of control. I used to have hascaps as well.
You did?
But they didn't do well for me, and I think I also gave them to that same friend. And I did have a blackberry, and that was doing really well. But I decided I wanted something prettier there.
Sure.
So I feel like I've had some experience, but at the end of the day, strawberries the only one that survived my garden.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, I had raspberries too that just got out of control, and I ended up moving them to the alley, which I think in my neighborhood is kind of common. Like if you walk through the alleys, a lot of people have a little patch back there because you can kind of it's not in your yard, but you can still access it and stuff like that. I think one of my neighbors once mapped out all of the yards and which berries they had that were accessible from the alley, so you could go find the black cap raspberries or whatever.
Yeah. That's kind of fun. I feel like we should bring back. I mean, alleys in the city, like ours, I feel like, aren't used in a way that maybe would be really rewarding. So maybe we should plant them up with berries.
Yeah. And I have lately, because I have probably about the size of a carport worth of ground on the alley side of my fence. In the last few years, I've even been putting out my pumpkins there. In the fall, I'll just throw the pumpkins out there and then kind of break them up with an axe, and then those seeds will sprout the following year. So now I have a pumpkin patch that grows out of that area. Throughout northern Asia, honeyberries were often considered health-promoting foods. Traditional uses varied from region to region. The berries were consumed as nutrient-rich foods and were sometimes used to support wellness during harsh winters. Modern scientists have discovered that honeyberries contain high levels of vitamin C, anthocyanins, polyphenols, and antioxidants. In fact, some honeyberry varieties contain even more antioxidant compounds than blueberries. Although people had gathered honeyberries honeyberries for centuries, large scale cultivation didn't begin until relatively recently. In the 20th century, plant breeders in Russia became interested in the fruit's agricultural potential. Many regions experienced extremely cold weathers and short growing seasons, and researchers sought fruits that could thrive under those conditions, and honeyberries were the perfect candidates. Russian breeding programs selected plants with larger berries, better flavor, higher yields, and more consistent ripening. And by the mid 1900s, honeyberries were being grown in gardens and research stations throughout parts of Russia. The berry was gradually transformed from a wild fruit into a cultivated crop. Meanwhile, in Japan, honeyberries developed a slightly different story. On the island of Hokkaido, haskap became a beloved regional fruit. The berries were made into jams, syrups, candies, ice creams, and desserts. And over time, haskap became associated with the local identity and regional pride. Visitors to Hokkaido can still find countless products celebrating the berry. Honeyberries arrived in North America through researchers, breeders, and adventurous gardeners looking for fruits suited to cold climates. Researchers in Canada, specifically the University of Saskatchewan, played a major role in introducing improved haskap varieties to commercial growers. And by the early 2000s, honeyberries started appearing in nurseries across North America. They are becoming a common sight in food forests, homesteads, and backyard gardens across Minnesota. I think that's so oddly recent. Doesn't that seem
Mm,
like the 2000s? Like, that's
yeah,
crazy.
that does seem very recent. I mean, for plants in general, I feel like, unless you're
Mhm.
a newly created hybrid thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's really interesting.
There is a native honeysuckle called the fly honeysuckle that exists in northern Canada, but it's not native down south here in Minnesota.
Ah, but it's called a honeysuckle.
It is, yeah, and it looks this there's a red one and a blue one, and the blue one is edible and looks really similar. It's just called like a fly honeysuckle. But yeah, I mean, that hascaps are honeysuckles.
Interesting. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So, are honeyberries similar to blueberries? Blueberries belong to the genus Vaccinium, which includes cranberries and huckleberries. Honeyberries belong to the honeysuckle family and are more closely related to ornamental honeysuckles than they are to blueberries. The plants themselves look a bit different. Blueberries typically grow upright with round berries, and honeyberries produce elongated fruits that resemble tiny blue fingers, bells, or even miniature eggplants. And the flavor is a bit
Mhm.
different too. Many people describe honeyberries as tasting like a blend of blueberry, raspberry, blackberry, and currant with a touch of honey and a pleasant tartness. Some varieties lean sweeter, while others have a complex wine like flavor. One major advantage for northern gardeners is timing. Honeyberries often ripen 2 to 4 weeks before blueberries, and that means fresh fruit can be harvested long before blueberry season begins. Blueberries are wonderful plants, but they come with a challenge. They require acidic soil, typically with a pH between 4.5 and 5.5. And in many parts of Minnesota and across the Midwest, native soils are much less acidic than that. As a result, gardeners have to amend their soil with acidic fertilizers, sulfur, peat moss, pine needles, and other materials to create the conditions blueberries need. And those soil conditions have to be maintained over time. Honeyberries are much less demanding. They prefer well drained soil and benefit from compost like most garden plants, but they can tolerate a much wider range of soil types and pH levels. For many homeowners, this means you can simply dig a hole, plant the shrub, and start growing. They establish quickly and begin producing fruit with relatively little fuss. However, most honeyberries are not self fertile. That means a flower usually cannot effectively pollinate itself or another flower of the same variety. So, to produce a good harvest, pollen must come from a different but compatible cultivar. Without that exchange, you'll get very few berries. The key is choosing varieties that bloom at roughly the same time. There are several varieties out there to choose from. One of the most impressive is the boreal blizzard, developed by the University of Saskatchewan. It produces some of the largest honeyberries available, and the fruits can be nearly twice the size of older varieties and have a rich, sweet flavor. Its sister variety, Boreal Beauty, is another excellent choice. Many gardeners consider it to be one of the best tasting cultivars. There's also the Aurora and the Honeybee and many other varieties. Many growers pair Aurora and Honeybee together because their bloom times overlap well. For Minnesota gardeners, combinations such as the Aurora and Honeybee and the Boreal Blizzard and the Boreal Beauty can provide excellent pollination and abundant harvests. The Honeyberry, a berry born in cold forests and northern mountains, a fruit gathered by northern communities for centuries, a crop refined by breeders in Russia and cherished in Japan, and now a promising fruit for gardeners across North America. It reminds us that some of the world's most remarkable plants aren't found in tropical jungles or ancient orchards. Sometimes they're growing quietly in the coldest places on Earth, waiting for us to discover them.
Water is probably the most misunderstood gardening task, and most gardeners worry about fertilizing, pruning, and plant selection. But the truth is that improper watering causes more plant problems than almost anything else. And the tricky part, the symptoms of overwatering and underwatering often look very similar. So, the biggest watering mistakes gardeners make, one of the most common is watering too frequently. So, people often give their plants a little splash every day because it feels like you're helping, right? Unfortunately, that's exactly how you create weak root systems. And so plants are a little bit like teenagers. If you hand them everything they need every day, they never learn to actually work for it. And so instead, roots stay near the top of the soil where they become vulnerable to heat and drought. So deep, infrequent watering encourages roots to grow downwards where moisture remains available much longer. And another common mistake is watering based on the calendar. The garden doesn't care that it's Tuesday. A cool, cloudy week may require no watering at all, and a hot, windy week may require significantly more. The soil really is kind of what helps determine the schedule many times. Anissa, what's been your experience with watering or lessons you've learned in your time in the garden?
Yeah, I guess I really do like to keep an eye on my plants and let them tell me visually when they need water. And
Yeah.
keeping track of rain cycles and stuff like that. I do remember when I started learning more about evergreens, just the importance of when you're
Mm,
planting evergreens, deep watering, especially if you plant
yeah.
them late in the year. And
Right.
I think that's something I really try to dig in deep with people at the garden store when they're buying evergreens. I'm like, okay, we need
Yeah.
like long, slow water. So half an hour,
Yep.
hose on low, but
Yep.
not every day. Like do it every few days for the first couple
Yeah.
weeks, and just really trying to walk them through it. I just see people losing evergreens a lot because of they're not watering them enough in the
Absolutely.
beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. And for us in the wintertime, I feel like what people don't realize is evergreens are continually giving off moisture into the air. And so, the sun and winds of the winter can really dry out evergreens. And so, if they're newly planted, like you said, it's important that they go into winter and the ground freezing, having moisture in the soil. Sometimes we go through periods, especially with I feel like our rain patterns and climate change, like we don't really get cold until late enough, or we get one cold snap, but not enough to freeze the ground. And then the ground starts to dry out because there's no rain or moisture happening. We didn't get snow cover yet. And so those can really create a lot of problems, I feel like, for evergreens and newly planted things, especially. Um,
Absolutely. I feel too that people psychologically feel like they don't need to water when the temperatures drop, like it gets colder, so
yeah.
they don't need to water when
Mm,
they you really should be watering those new evergreens up until when the ground
yeah.
freezes, even if it's chilly.
Absolutely. And I feel like the biggest thing I tell people buying new plants is you just bought this plant in a pot and you dug a hole and you put that plant root ball in the ground. The roots haven't started venturing out to start pulling in moisture yet, right? So, you still, in a sense, are kind of still watering the plant in the can, but it's in the ground. So, granted, it's not going to dry out as fast, but it doesn't have the extensive root system yet to pull in moisture. It's still in that confined area. And I think that helps too people realize oh, that's why I should keep an eye on it and water it. Not just assume I watered it, this week and then done. But also don't need to water it every single hour. You know what I mean? You can kill it that way too. So how much water do plants actually need? The general rule is about 1 inch of water per week from rainfall or irrigation. But Here's where things get interesting. A mature oak tree doesn't need the same amount of water as newly planted basil. So, plant age matters, soil type matters, temperature matters, wind, sun exposure. And the easiest test is still kind of the finger test. I feel like stick your finger 2 inches into the soil. If it's dry, it's time to water. If it's damp, leave it alone. It's simple, it's free, and more accurate than most watering schedules, I find, right?
Hmm.
Have you used different things to tell moisture within like a plant or soil or anything like that, Anissa?
Not aside from the method you just described.
Yeah, I know, right? It's kind of the tried and true. And it's funny when you say that sometimes to people, I kind of want to like follow up and be like, did you actually stick your finger in the ground? And sometimes find like maybe people who aren't gardeners are like afraid to get their hands dirty, even, like,
Yeah,
like putting my
yeah,
finger would be like, oh, well, it's dirty. Now I got to wash my hands. But it'd be like,
yeah. It might
it's
sound kind of gross or something.
but it's really the best way. So, watering perennials correctly, established perennials are often tougher than gardeners think. And so, many native plants actually prefer periods of drying between waterings. So, things like coneflower, black eyed Susan, blazing star, butterfly weed, little blue stem. They've really evolved in prairie conditions where rainfall can be inconsistent, and so constant moisture can actually weaken them. For established perennial beds, one deep watering, maybe every 5 to 7 days during dry periods, is usually better than daily watering. And watering at the base of the plant rather than spraying foliage whenever possible. Wet leaves, plus humidity during the summer sometimes for us here can sometimes equal disease opportunities or powdery mildew. Do you have some really good drought resistant plants, Anissa, that you've used in the garden or you have that you're
um,
kind of like, I don't even touch that thing?
Yeah, I mean, now that my native perennial beds are established, I don't water
Yeah.
them almost ever. I mean, I had to baby them for a couple of years, and now their
Yeah.
roots are probably 6 feet deep, and they're doing great.
Yep.
In the backyard where I have a bunch of maple trees, they suck all the water out of the soil, so it's really hard to
Yeah.
get stuff to grow there. But I'm trying to
Mm.
grow baptisia back there because that can tolerate dry
Yeah.
conditions if it can ever make its way through the root system of the maple tree.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Absolutely.
It's still looking a little small, but maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I always think of sedum, and it's like I will plant it and rarely ever throw water on it. Like almost
Mhm.
afraid, like I don't want to add any more water. I think it's also knowing your soil types because, like you said, if you know you have maples that suck up a lot of water, you have really dry soil, right?
Yeah.
And I know I kind of have a little bit wet soil because it's very clay based. So the amount of watering I do is less just because I know it sits in the ground. And if I overwater, is usually a bigger problem for me. But I think there's also like my pines. Like I don't water my pines nearly as much, even when they're new, because there's again that moisture and I need better drainage. And so I don't want to add anything extra to kind of, make them sit in a swamp of water, which isn't good. So, yeah, I feel like there's always those key plants that I feel like, and then there's the other ones that I'll pass by, like a stilby in my hostas that'll be like, you will take water all day, every day.
Absolutely.
Okay, so watering shrubs and trees, and this is where some people get in trouble. People kind of baby flowers, but sometimes maybe forget about trees. Trees and shrubs kind of represent some of the largest investments in the landscape, so it makes sense to like figure out best how to water them. And so newly planted trees can take 2 to 3 years to really like establish enough, and newly planted shrubs often take 1 to 2 years. So during that establishment, slow, deep watering is critical. And so a good rule is like new trees are like 10 to 15 gallons once or twice weekly during dry weather. And like new shrubs would be a deep soak 1 to 2 times weekly. And the goal is moist soil several inches deep, not muddy, not swampy, like think sponge, not swimming pool. Um, and so one trick is placing a hose at a slow trickle near the root zone for like 20 to 45 minutes. I also thought we'd talk about vegetable gardens because I think they're kind of drama queens in my estimation. So Vegetable gardens have completely different expectations. They're basically the high maintenance celebrities of the garden. So, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, squash, lettuce all perform best with like consistent moisture. And so, fluctuating moisture can sometimes lead to problems like blossom end rot, cracked tomatoes, bitter cucumbers, or poor yields. And vegetable gardens typically need more frequent watering than ornamental beds. The best approach really is drip irrigation or soaker hoses if you have them. They place water directly where it's needed while reducing the evaporation. And yes, your tomatoes would absolutely love a personal assistant if they could get one. Have you found that in your vegetable garden, Anissa?
Yeah, I used to have soaker hoses, but over
Yeah.
time they just sort of, I don't know, the holes sort of like filled in with dirt and they just became less effective. So I had to pull those out. And then I bought a drip irrigation system that I will admit is still in the box in my garage. I bought it last year too.
We need to put that together,
I
Anissa.
know. And we've had a pretty good rain cycle recently,
Yeah.
so I haven't
Yep.
even needed to water too much, but,
Yeah.
I do just
Right.
have, like, a low sprinkler I'll stick in there. However, to your point, I got a little smidge of blight on one of my tomato plants, and
Mm.
so I've
Hmm.
been trying to avoid any overhead watering after
Yeah.
removing those leaves.
Yeah, I mean, I have my all my vegetable beds and herbs or whatever on drip, and I love drip. I actually have it across my all my garden beds as well, more as needed. Like I rarely run it, but it comes in super handy for vegetables because I tend to run it probably every other day or so. But I also have raised beds, and I also do some things in pots, and those, so of course those need to be watered way more frequently. But I have drip set up to all of them, so I don't have to think about it every day, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, that's a great convenience to have for sure. It takes a lot of work out of
Yeah.
gardening.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think my drip system is also, so I'm a little fancy. I have mine also connected through a Wi-Fi and system, and I have a little like weather monitoring system too in my garden.
Oh
So
my
it's
goodness.
monitoring both the amount of rain we get, which is super helpful for me to track so I know how much rain is kind of getting to the garden in general, but it also connects to that system, and if it's anticipated to water that day on a Tuesday, let's say, it'll say, gosh, it just rained, or we anticipate rain. So it'll skip waterings based off of how much water has already come to the garden.
Ugh, smart garden.
It'll like water like slowly and drip, and then it'll pause for like 10-15 minutes and then finish watering again as like a
Amazing.
slow and deep watering versus like a constant trickle happening. Yeah, it's really amazing what you can actually find out there. And it's not as complicated as I think everyone might think it is. It might be a few dollars for different systems if you want it, but you can put together a really easy like soaker hose, like you said, or drip system, and you can just get very basic timers if you want it, or you manually just turn them on. So I thought I'd talk quick about some common watering myths, just to bust a few myths here. So, one, wilting means more water. What do you think of that one, Anissa?
Well, if especially thinking about the vegetable garden, if it's really hot during the day, the
Yeah.
plants will look like they're wilting from, but it's really just like heat stress, and as soon as the
Yep.
sun goes down, they perk back up. So,
Yeah.
I think there are multiple factors definitely to consider when looking at a
Yeah.
wilting plant.
Absolutely. I always think of the hydrangeas and when people are buying them. And, one of the reasons we tell like certain plants are best only in like eastern sun or that morning sun versus the afternoon sun is because they'll get like a heat stress. So, like, I feel like some of those macrophylla hydrangeas are great ones for that. That if you have them in full sun, you will see the wilting and it'll feel like, oh God, it needs water. But it doesn't. It's just the heat stress that's causing it to like do that. So,
Mhm.
um, what about watering during the day burns your leaves? Yeah.
Did you ever
So,
do that when you were a kid, like, with a magnifying glass, like, burn stuff in the
I
yard?
mean, with an actual, yes, with
Yeah.
an actual magnifying glass. I mean, I was one of those kids, and
Yeah, for sure.
sorry, I probably took out a few ants.
Ugh.
Ooh, I know
But yeah,
they're
those
coming
little
back.
water droplets on a leaf, they can act like
Yeah.
little magnifying glasses.
So the truth is, it's mostly false, though. So water
What?
droplets generally. don't magnify sunlight enough to actually burn the plants. So you can water during the day if necessary, but obviously morning is simply more efficient to do so.
How many people have I told this to the whole time being false
Yeah.
information?
And some of that is just more not watering on the leaves, but in a sense, if you need to water during the day, because that's when you need to do it, like it's fine, right? I think it's more about consistently doing it during the daytime. The moisture, humidity that probably picks up during the midday and the full sun can cause other disease issues and things on the plant too. I think the only other things to mention is things about like mulch helps the situation. Planting your plant in the right place with the right soil type and structure is important. Those all help to not have to need as much water or to be more efficient in keeping water within the ground. So it's all things to think of. I thought I'd end a little bit as we are going through summer of just like helping plants through summer heat waves, right? So we're coming up to July, where typically for most people, that's the hottest temperatures, although we've already been seeing really hot temperatures across the world, I feel like lately. And so when temperatures push into the 90s and beyond, plants really appreciate some extra support. And so a few tricks would be making sure one, to water deeply before the heat wave arrives, if possible. Add mulch if necessary to make sure there's maybe 2 to 3 inches of mulch or wood chip mulch. Delay other activities like pruning until cooler weather or fertilizing during that time. And consider even in some cases, maybe temporary shade cloth for vegetables or maybe some newly planted specimens if you're planting in that big heat. We've talked about rock mulch, if you will, before, or rock beds, and that's going to obviously add a lot more heat here. So that's one of the reasons we don't recommend a lot of like garden beds in rock like that, because many times the plants in them are not meant to be in rocks and can suffer during these high heat times because when they want to cool off at night, at least, and kind of recuperate, they're not. That heat is being absorbed continually through the night from the rock that is heated up through the day. So, watering isn't about following a strict schedule, it's about understanding your plants, your soil, and the conditions they're growing in. The goal isn't simply to keep plants alive, it's to help them develop deeper roots, become more resilient, and thrive through whatever Mother Nature throws their way. As our summers continue to bring new challenges, smart watering practices may become one of the most valuable skills a gardener can learn. And remember, when in doubt, check the soil before you check the weather app. Your plants will thank you, and your water bill will probably too. Hey, Anissa, do we have a listener question for today?
Well, yeah, we do. Let me see here. Okay. Tom writes in and asks, I haven't fertilized some of the shrubs that I got last year, and I know I should fertilize them this year. Is it too late to fertilize them?
Yeah. I I don't know what you would say, Anissa, but for me, I would say like a light application is usually fine right now, but I
Mm-hmm.
probably wouldn't do a heavy fertilization. I feel like I would have tried to have done that early June, May, if that. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like, but I do feel like like right now, like hydrangeas are just getting going. Roses, I feel like you can fertilize every single month actually and be fine. And some things like newly planted, I feel like you can use like that biotone fertilizer or other light fertilizers that are pretty low in the numbers, the three numbers. And I feel like that should be fine if you're getting started. We're talking about shrubs, so I would say yes. But I would say like annuals is like every week you can like give them like a water soluble fertilizer if you chose. What do you
Yeah, for
think?
sure. Yeah, flowers and vegetables definitely. But if it's a shrub, especially if it's like a new or small, I
Yeah.
planted really, really tiny arborvitaes last year and I haven't
Yeah.
fertilized them yet. And I think, I mean, it's still June, right? So it's not that late. And so I think I'll probably go out there and give them a little fertilizer just to try to get them to get
Yeah.
bigger faster.
I also
They're
think
so little.
like some things like don't need fertilizer every single year over year either, right? I feel
Mhm.
like, some things grow perfectly fine. I always think of like Japanese maples don't really need like continual push of fertilizer to like push more growth and whatever. They actually do a little bit better without. Um, yeah, but like, yeah, some of the conifers and things like that, it's like nice to hit it when it's just starting to push that new growth is like
Mhm.
when they want it versus if that new growth is already stopped, now, like, it's probably not as needed. Um, you know, create a calendar create a calendar reminder for next year.
Yeah. But definitely, I would say if it's after June into July, I would just wait till next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could just use compost even, like if you weren't doing an
Mhm.
actual synthetic or other natural fertilizer, like a natural fertilizer would just be compost itself, which maybe you're just doing to even prep for the summer heat and add it as like a layer of mulch, really, because that'll break down and it will feed your plant as well. And so maybe that's even just a route to take.
Absolutely. Compost, gardener's best friend. If you have a gardening question you'd like us to answer, please write to us at petalandplot@gmail.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you know and click the follow button to hear our next episode.
As garden designers here at Petal and Plot, we also offer year-round in-person and virtual gardening consultations and custom garden designs as well. Want to see more of what we're up to? Please follow us on Instagram at Petal and Plot. That's PETALNPLOT.